died. For 10 whole minutes, my heart stopped. My lungs emptied. My body went cold. And yet, I was still there. Not in the way the living understand, but in a way that still haunts me every time I close my eyes. Because I saw what's coming. Jesus showed me the truth, the terrifying future that awaits us if we do not change. Cities swallowed by fire, floods consuming entire states, people turning against each other in ways more horrifying than any war. I saw something rise, something that no one is ready for. And the worst part? It's already beginning. But before I tell you what he revealed, let me take you back to the moment my world stopped. The moment I left my body and entered a reality I never imagined existed. It was an ordinary winter night, the kind that makes you feel safe in the warmth of home. My family sat together at the dinner table, a rare moment of comfort in a world that felt increasingly uncertain. My mother set down a steaming bowl of mashed potatoes. My father, exhausted from another long shift at the auto shop, spoke about work, his voice heavy with frustration. My little sister, Emily, was giggling at something on TV. And then, in an instant, everything changed. A sharp pain tore through my chest. My fork slipped from my fingers, clattering against my plate. My breath caught as an invisible weight crushed my ribs. I tried to speak, to call out, but my voice failed me. My mother's face twisted in horror as she reached for me. My father shouted my name. Emily gasped, frozen in her chair. Then nothing. Silence. Stillness. The weight of the world lifted, and for the first time I felt free. I hovered above my body, watching the chaos unfold. My mother's hands trembled as she shook me, her sobs sharp and desperate. My father fumbled with his phone, his voice cracking as he called 911. Emily, too young to understand, pressed her hands together and whispered a prayer she had learned in Sunday school. I should have felt afraid, but I didn't. I wasn't in pain anymore. There was no fear, no panic, only peace. Then something pulled me, a force, strong, yet gentle, wrapping around me like invisible arms. It wasn't gravity. It wasn't wind. It was something else, something unseen, but undeniable. I was being drawn upward. The world below me faded. The voices of my family became distant echoes. And then, the darkness cracked open, revealing a tunnel of light, stretching into infinity. And at the end of that light, he was waiting for me. I cannot tell you what it felt like to stand in his presence. There are no words, no language that can capture it. But he spoke, and his voice was like thunder and whisper, all at once. Jonathan, you must remember what you see. And then the visions began. I saw fires consuming forests, cities drowning in water, people turning against each other, their faces twisted in anger and fear. I saw something looming on the horizon, something no one was prepared for. Then he showed me hope, a way out, a way forward, but only if we choose it. If I had not died, I would not have believed it myself. But I did. And now I must tell you before it's too late. The moment my heart stopped, I expected darkness. I expected nothingness, a void, a silence so deep it would swallow me whole. But that's not what happened. Instead, I was still there. I could see everything. The dinner table, my mother's horrified face, my father frantically grabbing his phone, his hands shaking as he dialed 911. My little sister, Emily, had pressed herself against the wall, her small hands clasped together as she whispered a prayer, her voice barely audible over the chaos. I wanted to move, to reach out, to tell them I was okay, but my body lay motionless. I wasn't inside it anymore. I was above it, hovering like a forgotten shadow. What's happening? The thought screamed through my mind, but no sound left my lips. My mother's sobs filled the room as she shook my lifeless shoulders. Jonathan, baby, wake up, please. My father's voice was sharp, desperate. He's not breathing. I don't feel a pulse. Please hurry. The paramedics would take at least 5 minutes to get here. But I knew. Somehow I knew. I didn't have 5 minutes. A wave of panic crashed over me. But it was distant, muted, as if the fear belonged to someone else. I could still hear the frantic sounds of my family crying, but they were fading, slipping into the background like echoes in a dream. The world itself seemed to blur at the edges. And then I felt it, a force, gentle yet impossible to resist, pulling me upward. It wasn't gravity. It wasn't wind. It was something else, something unseen but undeniably real. No, I thought. No, no, no. I'm not ready. I need to go back. But it didn't matter. The room shrank below me, my mother's cries growing fainter, my father's pleading voice stretching into an eerie hum. The walls of our house melted away, replaced by an endless, swirling darkness. Then, just as suddenly, the darkness split open. A tunnel of light stretched before me, shimmering, shifting like liquid gold. It wasn't harsh like the sun. It was warm, alive, pulsing with something I didn't understand. A soft whisper floated through the air, though I couldn't tell where it was coming from. "You are not done yet." The words brushed against me, not spoken, but felt, settling deep inside my chest. "You must remember what you see." The voices weren't frightening. They weren't demanding. They were calm, steady, filled with a sense of urgency, but also kindness. I wanted to ask what they meant, but before I could, the pull grew stronger. I was moving now, weightless, drawn forward into the tunnel of light, leaving the world I had always known behind. The tunnel of light pulled me forward, faster than I could comprehend. My panic had dulled into something strange, like I had no control, no choice but to surrender to whatever force was guiding me. I tried to fight it, to resist, but there was nothing to hold on to, nothing to pull against. I was weightless, untethered. Then the darkness was gone. I emerged into something beyond anything I had ever imagined. A vast, golden realm stretched before me, shimmering like sunlight dancing on water. It wasn't just bright, it was alive. The air itself seemed to glow, humming with a warmth that wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. For the first time since I had left my body, the fear faded. I felt whole, weightless yet grounded, free yet connected to something far greater than myself. The chaos, the pain, the cries of my family, it all felt like a distant memory, a world I had left behind. But deep within me, a new feeling stirred. Urgency. I wasn't here by accident. This place, this overwhelming sense of peace. It wasn't the end. There was something I needed to see, something I needed to know. Then I felt it. Presence. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was vast, powerful, yet filled with love so profound it made my chest ache. I couldn't see a face yet, but I felt it drawing near. And then I knew. I wasn't alone. I was standing in the presence of Jesus. The presence grew stronger, overwhelming, yet filled with warmth. Then, from the endless light, a figure emerged. At first, the brilliance was too intense to see anything but a silhouette. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw him. Jesus. He stood before me, clothed in flowing white robes, radiant yet humble. The light surrounding him wasn't just light. It was alive, pulsing with love, peace, and something even deeper, authority. I wanted to drop to my knees, to weep, to cry out, but I couldn't move. Every part of me was frozen, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of his presence. Then he spoke. "Jonathan, my child." His voice was unlike anything I had ever heard, gentle, yet powerful enough to shake the heavens. "You have been chosen to carry an important message." His hand rested on my shoulder, and instantly, the golden realm around us began to shift. The warmth dimmed, and suddenly, visions burst into existence around me. I wasn't in heaven anymore. I was watching the future. Cities, once filled with life, lay in ruins. Streets were cracked and flooded. Buildings stood abandoned, their windows shattered like empty eyes staring into the abyss. Fires raged, devouring forests, swallowing entire neighborhoods in flames. Storms unlike anything I had ever seen swept through towns, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. I turned, desperate to look away, but the visions wouldn't stop. People were fighting, neighbors, friends, even families, screaming, tearing each other apart over politics, power, and fear. Children cried for their parents. The sick were left to fend for themselves, and faith was nowhere to be found. I felt my knees give out. I collapsed onto the glowing surface beneath me, my chest heaving. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Then I screamed, "Why? Why are you showing me this?" Jesus knelt beside me, his eyes filled with sorrow. "This," he said, his voice heavy with grief, "is the future of a world that has forgotten love, faith, and unity." Tears streamed down my face. The weight of what I had seen crushed me. "Is there no hope?" Jesus placed a hand over my heart. Warmth flooded through me, driving out the despair. His eyes, full of infinite love, met mine. "There is still time," he said. "Tell them to prepare, to return to me. Only through faith, kindness, and forgiveness can they change what lies ahead." I nodded, though my heart still felt heavy. I didn't know how I would do it. I didn't know who would listen. But I knew one thing for certain: this message was no accident. I could hardly breathe as the visions unfolded before me, each one more horrific than the last. Scenes of devastation, chaos, and despair that sent my heart racing. I couldn't turn away, couldn't close my eyes to what Jesus was showing me. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot as I watched the world I knew fall apart. It started with nature. The world itself seemed to be unraveling. I saw a massive hurricane sweeping through the southern United States, ravaging entire communities. The storm was relentless, with winds so powerful they tore houses from their foundations. The floodwaters rose, swallowing neighborhoods, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. And then fire. A wildfire raged through dry forests, unstoppable, engulfing towns and cities. The flames burned so hot and fierce, it was as if the earth itself was screaming. I could hear the desperate cries of families trapped by the fire, their faces twisted in terror. But it wasn't just the natural world falling apart, it was humanity itself. The division was everywhere. People were fighting in the streets, filled with anger and hatred. I saw families torn apart by words of contempt, neighbors turning on one another. There was no love, no compassion, only fear and self-interest. The world had become a place where people no longer cared for one another. And then, Jesus' voice broke through my shock, calm and full of sorrow. "This is the future of the world, Jonathan. A world that has forgotten love, faith, and unity." My mind spun. "Is there still hope?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Can this be changed?" Jesus looked at me with deep, compassionate eyes. His hand rested on my shoulder, and I felt warmth spread through me. "It is not too late. No matter what you have seen, redemption is always possible for those who seek it. Tell them, tell the world that it's still in their hands." The weight of those words hit me like a freight train. I had to do something. I had to tell them. Just as the weight of despair threatened to crush me, the darkness around me shifted. The raging storms, the burning cities, the shattered families. All of it began to fade. The chaos dissolved into something entirely different. Light, soft, golden, and warm. It spread like the first rays of dawn after a long, endless night. My breath caught in my throat as new visions unfolded before me, so vivid and beautiful that they made my chest ache. I saw communities coming together, their faces weary but determined. The streets that had once been filled with fear were now filled with people rebuilding, side by side. Strangers who had never spoken before were sharing food, helping each other clear away debris, offering shelter to those who had lost everything. There were no divisions, no rich or poor, no young or old, no enemies. Just people united in love and survival. Then, another vision. Hospitals, once overwhelmed with sickness and despair, were now places of healing beyond explanation. I saw doctors and nurses gathering in prayer before surgeries, their hands clasped together, their eyes filled with faith. And then miracles. Patients who had been given no hope suddenly sitting up, healed. Wounds closing, breath returning, strength restored. I gasped. It didn't make sense. It defied everything I knew about life and death. I turned to Jesus, my voice barely a whisper. How? How is this possible? He looked at me with eyes that held eternity itself. This is the power of faith, he said. This is what happens when love replaces fear, when kindness overcomes selfishness. This is what humanity is meant to be. Tears burned in my eyes. It was possible. I saw families embracing, their long-standing resentments dissolving as they forgave one another. I saw former enemies reconciling, shaking hands, their eyes brimming with understanding. People who had once felt lost, broken, without purpose, now standing tall, their spirits renewed. One vision struck me hardest. A father, once estranged from his son, standing on a doorstep, tears in his eyes. The door opened, and instead of anger, there was an embrace. A lifetime of pain vanished in a single moment of forgiveness. Jesus turned to me. Tell them, he said, each person carries the power to heal, not only themselves but the world. Through love, kindness, and forgiveness, they will write a new future. The weight in my chest loosened. Hope, real, undeniable hope, was alive. I stood there, frozen in awe, as Jesus' words sank into the deepest part of my soul. The disasters you have seen are not punishments, he said, his voice both firm and compassionate. They are opportunities, trials that will awaken the hearts of many. In the darkest moments, faith shines its brightest. A strange feeling washed over me. Peace. It was unlike anything I had ever known, deeper than any comfort I had ever felt on earth. I understood now. The future wasn't set in stone. Change was possible, but humanity had to choose it. Love had to overcome fear, faith had to rise above doubt. And yet, even as that peace filled me, something else crept into my heart. A sorrow so heavy it nearly broke me. I knew what was coming. I turned to Jesus, my voice barely above a whisper. Do I have to go back? Tears stung my eyes. How could I leave this place? This radiant, living light. The warmth that wrapped around me like a shield. The overwhelming presence of love, purer than anything I had ever known. Jesus smiled, a knowing, gentle smile. Your time here is not yet finished, he said, placing his hand over my heart. The world needs you. You are my messenger. A soft melody rose in the air, voices, countless voices, singing in a harmony so perfect it sent chills through me. Angels. Their song wasn't just sound. It was a force, filling the air, wrapping around me, lifting my spirit even as my heart ached to stay. Jesus looked into my eyes one last time. You will remember everything, he promised. Be strong. Be courageous. I am always with you. A sudden pull. A force I couldn't resist. The light around me began to fade, replaced by a sensation I had almost forgotten. Weight. A heaviness settled into me, dragging me down, away from the brilliance of heaven. I reached out, desperate to hold onto the moment, onto the love, onto him. But then darkness, and suddenly I was falling. I gasped. Air flooded my lungs like a tidal wave, burning, overwhelming, pulling me back into a reality that felt foreign and heavy. My body jerked violently, my chest rising and falling as if I had been drowning and had just surfaced. The world around me snapped into focus. The harsh glare of hospital lights, the steady beep of machines, the gasps of doctors frozen in shock. A sharp sob pierced the air, and before I could even make sense of what was happening, warm arms wrapped around me. Jonathan! Oh my God, Jonathan! My mother's voice cracked with emotion as she held me close, her body trembling against mine. My father stood beside her, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of my hospital bed as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He's back, someone whispered. He was gone, but he's back. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. My entire body felt different, heavier, like I had been somewhere weightless and was now burdened by flesh again. But beneath that weight, I still felt something else. Something warm, alive, lingering inside my chest. Jesus' touch had not faded. Over the next few days, the questions came. Doctors called it a medical impossibility. They whispered about how my heart had stopped for nearly 10 minutes. How by all logic, I shouldn't be here. Some searched for explanations, oxygen deprivation, brain misfiring, hallucinations. But my family, they didn't need explanations. They saw the change in me. The way I carried myself, the calm certainty in my eyes, the way I no longer feared anything. They believed, without question, that something greater had happened. Then came the others, the skeptics, reporters, strangers, even some doctors who had once been amazed now dismissed my story as a child's delusion. "You were dreaming," one doctor told me, shaking his head. "A brain can do strange things when deprived of oxygen." "You're just a kid," a reporter scoffed. "You expect people to believe you saw heaven?" But others listened. People who heard my words felt something stir inside them. And soon things began to change. A struggling mother, desperate and hopeless, heard my story online and started praying for the first time in years. Days later, she received an unexpected job offer. A man who had lost faith after his wife's passing walked into a church for the first time, just to see if it was real. He left in tears, feeling something he hadn't felt in decades, peace. Little by little, miracles began to happen. First, I didn't know where to start. How do you tell the world that you've been to heaven? That you met Jesus, that you saw the future? Not just the destruction, but the hope? I didn't have all the answers. I was just a boy who had died and returned. But I had a message, and I had to share it. So I spoke to anyone who would listen. First, it was just my family. Then my church. Then small gatherings in town halls and living rooms. But soon, my words spread further than I ever imagined. My story reached beyond my quiet town, beyond my state, beyond the country. People from all walks of life, the lost, the broken, the hopeless, began to listen. And then, something amazing happened. A single mother, drowning in debt, heard my story online. That night, for the first time in years, she prayed. She didn't ask for riches or comfort, just strength. A few days later, she received a job offer she never expected, enough to provide for her children. A small-town community, once divided by petty arguments, came together after a devastating storm. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years worked side by side, rebuilding homes, sharing food, lifting one another up. When asked why, one man simply said, "Because love is stronger than fear." A man who had lost faith after his wife's passing stepped into a church, just to see if it was real. As he sat in the pew, he felt something stir deep within him. Hope. That day, he prayed for the first time in decades. It wasn't just words, it was change. Churches that had once been empty were now overflowing with people searching for something more. Strangers prayed together. Families forgave each other. People who had spent years consumed by anger and bitterness found peace. And the message spread. Social media became flooded with stories of miracles. Unexplained healings, reconciled relationships, lives turning around in ways no one could explain. People began using hashtags like "Change starts with us" and "Jesus is near." It was as if something had awakened inside them. I never claimed to be special. I never claimed to be a prophet. I was just a boy who had seen the truth. And the truth was simple: God had never left us. We had just stopped listening. But now people were listening again. Not everyone believed me. For every person who felt something stir in their soul, there was another who laughed, who scoffed, who dismissed me as nothing more than a deluded child. It was just a dream, they said. A hallucination. A desperate attempt to make sense of death. But I didn't argue. I didn't try to convince them. I simply repeated the words Jesus had spoken to me. Do not be afraid. Love one another. I am always with you. And then the world began to change. It didn't happen all at once, and it wasn't dramatic like the visions of destruction I had seen. Instead, it was quiet, gradual. like a seed planted deep in the earth, growing where no one could yet see. Those who had listened and prepared, those who had returned to faith, found themselves stronger than ever. When disaster struck, they were the ones who stood firm, helping those in need. When fear swept through the country, they were the ones who spoke of hope. While the world seemed to spiral into uncertainty, they did not waver because they knew the truth. God had never abandoned them. Miracles didn't always come in the form of great, supernatural events. Sometimes they were small, a broken family reunited, a man finding the strength to forgive, a community choosing kindness over division. But they were miracles all the same. Even in the face of doubt, I knew what I had seen. I had stood in the presence of Jesus. I had felt the overwhelming love of heaven. And I had been given a mission to share the truth that the future was not written in stone. We still had a choice. And so I spoke. I told the world, the storms are coming, but we do not have to face them alone. I reminded them, darkness may rise, but faith shines brightest in the night. And most of all, I told them what Jesus had told me. The future is not set. We can change it, but we must start now. I was gone. My heart had stopped. My body lay lifeless, yet my soul remained, somewhere beyond this world. In those 10 minutes of death, I saw the truth. I was taken beyond time, beyond fear, into a place of pure light, love, and divine presence. I stood before Jesus himself, and in that moment nothing else mattered. No pain, no doubt, no fear, just an overwhelming sense of peace. But Jesus didn't just comfort me. He showed me what is coming. He revealed the path humanity is walking, the destruction we are choosing, and the hope that still remains, if only we would return to him. When I came back, I wasn't the same. My heart still beats, my body still moves, but I now see with different eyes. The world feels different because I know the truth. God has never abandoned us, we have simply turned away. But it's not too late. Faith can heal, love can restore, and prayer can change everything. I need you to ask yourself something. If you were in my place, if you had seen what I saw, how would you feel? Would you ignore the warning? Or would you choose to believe, to act, to turn back toward the light? This is your chance. If you need hope, if you need strength, if you believe that faith can change your life, leave your prayer in the comments below. I will pray for you. Together, we can restore what was lost. If this message speaks to you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. The world needs faith now more than ever. Let's spread the light before the darkness takes hold. The future is in our hands.